To the HR professionals who know when something feels off and the ones who wish they had called sooner. To the questions asked before problems escalate and partnerships built before the panic sets in. To clarity over crisis and counsel over chaos. Cheers to HR. Welcome back to the HR Wine Bar. My name is Amy Luckenbill, and I am one of your co-hosts. Jamie Mormon is not able to join us today. As usually happens, an HR emergency comes up, and sometimes we have to step away from the things that were planned. So I am flying solo mission today, but I'm delighted to start out this episode with a little introduction. Today, we are pouring into an episode we believe every HR professional needs before something goes wrong. This episode is called Good Counsel, Familiarity, Foresight, and Fumé Blanc, which is an oakier savvy. And we're talking about why HR professionals should build an ongoing relationship with their advising attorney before a major legal issue lands on their desk. You can expect an honest conversation about what good counsel actually looks like in practice and the difference between reactive legal advice and proactive partnership, and how familiarity and context change the quality of the guidance that HR receives. We'll explore some common missteps, real world judgment calls, and how to engage legal counsel in a way that protects the organization while still supporting sound people decisions. We're delighted to be joined by Jennifer Petersen, an employment attorney based in Omaha who works closely with HR leaders, navigating complex employment issues. Jennifer brings a pragmatic, real-world perspective on how HR and legal can work together, not just when the crisis arises, but as ongoing partners in decision-making. Jennifer, welcome to the HR Wine Bar. I am delighted to have you, and I'm just going to get it out of the way and share with all of our listeners that we are show choir moms, and that's where where we first met. So it's a whole other kind of chaos to HR and employment law, but that's where our friendship started. So thank you so much for joining us. We are delighted to have you.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to share with HR business partners something that is the most important thing to me is helping you before you actually need me. And so I think this is a great topic that a lot of companies miss because they are trying to save on costs. And sometimes, you save a penny, spend a pound. So
Yep,
it's great to be
absolutely.
with you today. And cheers to show choir moms. It's show choir season. I mean, they are in
It
the
is.
thick of it.
It is.
So cheers
Yes.
to show choir moms.
Yes, I think you chaired a committee on the show choir team, and I just got an email from my former co-chair saying, "Hey, do you have the list of the materials and the shopping list?" Yes, I still have it because I'm HR. So cheers to HR moms.
Yes.
I know that I have some other colleagues in the HR sphere that are in that group as well. So thank you for the great lead in, though, the commentary about wanting to save money on the front side. One of the things we do in HR Wine Bar is we kind of follow a wine tasting selection. So the first thing we do is take a peek at it. What's the see? What do we see happening in this conversation? And that is one of the issues. The way HR typically engages with legal counsel. This podcast episode will pair with our legal update for Human Resource Association of the Midlands, or HRAM, who is our primary audience, but also folks across Nebraska and across the nation. And so our legal update takes place every February. It's just a standard practice we have in our program. But one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation is because if we end our relationship with counsel at a legal update, or we wait until, the problem is so big, that is just a common thing that we do, and we never really get to a level relationship ground where our counsel has the benefit of really deep context, right? And we just we do our legal update, we call when we need something, but in order for this relationship to work well, especially with multi-state employers, the rising complexities we have in the employment law space, especially in 2025. Things kind of went sideways on us in a multitude of different ways. The context just becomes more and more important. And instead of HR, just calling on the fly, I'd really like to see a more in depth conversation with counsel going forward. So thank you for helping us lead that. That was a perfect introduction to kind of frame where this relationship is right now, what we're seeing right now. Jennifer, what do you hear most often when HR calls you for the first time, just kind of out of the blue?
Well, if it's a newer client, it typically tends to be when they have a problem. So they've had a supervisor that said the wrong thing. They have an EEOC charge. Maybe the EEOC is calling. They got this notice from the Department of Labor and they have no idea what to do with it. And so for new clients, that's often when they get their first contact with me.
Yeah, yeah. And so you don't even, other than knowing that they're a client, are they even a client at that point sometimes? Or is that first call like, "Hey, I'd like to engage you?"
Yes. Hey, help. It's the SOS flag, right? So, oh my
Absolutely.
gosh, we got this help, I need help. And so, I say, and I'm sure most of your HR people say on a regular basis, I lack a time machine. So, so it's not just me.
Cheers to not to acquiring a time machine. That would be
Well, if you
fantastic.
engage me early on, you don't need one. So that's
Right.
really the perfect time to have a good relationship with counsel because, oftentimes when somebody calls me when they have a problem, we, work to resolve the problem, but then we take, the analysis of
Mhm.
what happened. And I try to approach HR issues kind of in a two-pronged way. One is this an individual one-off? Do we have just a bad supervisor who, has been trained, he knows what he's supposed to do, and yet he is still, telling dirty jokes at the, front desk every day when he comes in. I'm sure
Yep.
that's never happened to anyone.
Never,
Um,
not once.
or do we have, a larger systemic problem, which we have the manager that comes in, he says dirty jokes to the front desk every single day when he comes in. We don't have a policy, we don't have a complaint procedure. And all of a sudden, we not only have the individual bad actor who hasn't been trained, but we don't have any protection for the employer because we don't have a policy. The front desk person didn't know how to complain. And so, I partner with folks to try to figure out, what do we have here? Is it individual or is it a larger issue? And then we partner together to get a proactive strategic approach to address those problems before they happen. And so ideally, we've established that relationship ahead of time, but if we haven't, we can work backwards so for the next time the employer is better prepared and has more defenses in its arsenal as well. And ideally, we've done training and told people what they should and should not do and they follow the training. But as HR professionals, we all know that we do not live in a perfect world. But at least if we've told them and have a good policy, that's the best place to start so that we at least have something to talk about in the EEOC charge that is to come.
Spectacular. I'm just gonna do the call to action right up at the front. So, whenever I go usually I save it for the end and I'll reiterate it at the end, but, whenever I go into a new role, hopefully within the first couple of weeks, I am asking, "Who is your legal counsel?" Right? And picking up the phone and getting to know the person who's responsible for employment law at the firm where the company is has their property or their business advisors. And so I started that practice probably about 10 years ago. At a certain level, you start getting into, oh, I'm going to be the one calling this person going forward. And so if you're in that space and you've never called your attorney before, I'm going to encourage you to go set a baseline, even if it's 15 minutes just to, spend the hourly rate at least for 15 minutes so that they know who you are. They're not surprised by your phone call when you call up. Hopefully, they've seen your handbook or had a hand in developing it. It's not a what we call a Frankenbook, right? That's cobbled together in pieces of other people's uh, handbooks. Go back and listen to Handbook Hangover that Jamie and I did back at the beginning of our podcast. Um, but make that phone call in advance. I'm reminded of my not current, but last full-time role. Um, the company had changed their business attorney, their contracts attorney had gone to a different firm, and they were following that person to the firm. And I said, "Well, I would like to go over here for employment law because I already have a relationship with this person." And of course, they said, "No, we're not going to do that." And I'm like, "Great. Well, tell me who that person is." And we had a virtual meeting for probably 20, 30 minutes. They didn't even charge me. They just great. We were onboarding a new client that came over. And so just having that baseline, I understood their approach and they understood mine. And we just came to a consensus really early. I never did have to call them, but they also knew that they probably weren't going to get calls from me because I had already had things, kind of well in hand. And so I'm gonna encourage everybody, if you haven't done that, just take a 15-minute call with your advising counsel to make sure that you have a baseline. It's just like, going to the doctor and before you have trouble in getting your physical, right? It's just an annual physical. So let's swirl it around a little bit, Jennifer, and shake things up. You had mentioned before cost as a one of the reasons why a leader might delay reaching out, but what are some other reasons that you've heard from clients about why they waited?
Well, they just don't think they need anything, right? So it's like, well, it's the old adage, I don't want to go to the doctor. They always find things wrong with me, right? I don't want to go to the employment lawyer. They always find things that are wrong and then it just runs up my bill. And they don't see the value in it. But I think a long-term approach is much more prudent in terms of making those calls, making the introduction, because again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if you spend the time and spend the money to get good policies in place and you do the training on the policies, when you get a charge, hopefully you're going to be able to be successful on the charge, which doesn't turn into a lawsuit, which then costs you a heck of a lot of money in legal fees. But the other thing that I see, because it isn't a bottom line, this isn't part of anybody's budget, right? So a cost that never hits anybody's budget, and if it's a cost that doesn't hit their budget, they don't think about it. But what is your cost of having your vice president sit in deposition? There is an hourly cost to the company on having them sit. What is the cost to the company of, having your HR person, helping prepare discovery responses? If they've got 10 hours on discovery, that's 10 hours they're not spending on proactive things to help make your company a great place to work. And so there is a cost. It just doesn't hit anybody's budget or anybody's bottom line, and except for the actual legal fees. And I would urge employers to really think about those costs that don't necessarily hit a budget or a bottom line, but really do impact your business and your employees. If you've got an unhappy employee, that sometimes spreads like a cancer in your workforce, and you lose productivity and all of that. So I do a keynote on conflict and how unresolved conflict is kind of the number one problem of all employers. It's the base root of any employment thing that you're working on, whether it's retention, whether it's, recruiting, all of those things. It goes to unresolved conflict. And I do a little conversation about the cost of the crying employee. Somebody comes into
Mhm.
your office crying, and what's the cost,
Yeah.
right? And
And
so
I would assume you get past the hard numbers into the kind of the squishy stuff that's really about employee engagement and public relations and your employer brand, like, outside of the company. There are way more costs that are really, intangible, I guess. Maybe that's not the right word, but, not as easily quantifiable.
but you can quantify it. I mean,
Mhm.
if you even just a time of your if your general counsel is spending time on, executives who are gossiping, I mean, that general counsel's time is valuable. And if she is spending
Mhm.
her time, you know, fussing with executives that are gossiping about other executives, which then causes a whole, brouhaha in the office, that's real time. That's real dollars that the company's expended that just don't hit, a profit and loss sheet. But you
Sure.
really have to think about that and think about what that actually costs the company. So, the best defense is a good offense, which is, having proactive and practical advice that you can actually implement. So, one of the things that I have is I worked as in-house counsel for over 13 years in addition to my private practice experience. And I can't tell you how many times I worked with outside counsel and they said, "Well, you need to comply." That's great. Thanks. I know I need to comply. Guess what? Our system doesn't allow for that, you
Mhm.
know? And it just doesn't. And it's not going to. So what do we need to proactively do to partner together to solve this issue in a way that we can actually do? I mean, the advice that you must comply doesn't help me a bit. I need somebody to partner with me and look at our systems and walk with me step by step so that we can figure out how to creatively, solve a problem so that, moving forward, we aren't going to have bigger issues down the line. And I think that's really important to have somebody that's partnering with you in that way because just saying, okay, this is what the law is and this is what you have to do
Yep.
isn't enough. It's not enough.
Yeah, they really do need to, again, understand context at a deeper level and get into the weeds with you, because that's where you are. You're into the weedy place where people do not tread and
No one
create a
wants
path.
to tread. I mean, no one wants to be in those weeds with you, right? So
Nope.
so you need a implement lawyer that comes in with a weed whacker and is
Mm,
gonna,
let's clear it out.
clear it out and, maybe we need some new seed, you know,
Mhm,
plant
mhm.
some flowers,
Yep,
but I think that's really important.
plant flowers. I love that. Let's plant
Well,
some flowers on it. Yeah, you're not wrong, you're not wrong. If our policies and processes and training are all set up in the right buckets in the right sequence, in the right way, then we can spend some time planting flowers. You're not wrong. Not at all.
well, and there's opportunity if you do it in the right way, there's opportunity to have I call
Mhm,
what, a rah-rah moment, there's an opportunity to say, "Okay, we heard you. We listened. Thank you for bringing your concerns to us, and here's what
mhm,
we're going to do about it." And
mhm.
employees really appreciate that. They need
They
to
do.
be heard. They need to feel valued. And I think it's really important that HR has the tools to be able to do that. And if you have outside counsel that's saying, "Oh, well, you just need to comply," well,
Yep.
that's not enough. It's not enough. And so
Mhm.
I just think it's really important to try to structure, you know, what we might see as problems as opportunities, uh, to really either problem solve or implement something good going forward for our
Yep.
employees and approach it from that perspective rather than a finger pointing perspective about how, we're doing things wrong and da 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 da. Da. I mean, there is time sometimes where you need to have stern, honest conversations with people. And I think that's what a lot of people think of with HR, but I think there's opportunity to do a lot more than that and really have positive impact on the business. I mean, that's my favorite thing is when I can
Mhm.
partner with a client and we do something that permanently changes the trajectory of the organization. That is just my all-time favorite thing. I love partnering in that way. And it does plant flowers down the road, and it makes it easier to pull weeds when you've got good grass, good flowers, right?
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
you're always going to get weeds, but I can pluck a
Mhm.
weed if I've at least, laid a good foundation and a solid path.
I love that we have this gardening metaphor going on in February. That's fantastic. We've had a couple days of good sunshine in Omaha and 50 and 60 degrees, and now we're all itching to get into the garden. You are absolutely right. And when I was framing this conversation, to have in advance, I didn't even think about the prospect that the attorney is not just coming in to partner with you to solve this problem, but also to set you up for success going forward. My brain hadn't even gotten to the potential of that.
Well,
So
my favorite call is, "Hey, I have a question, and it's probably is the sky blue question, but I just need somebody to tell me the sky is blue." So at that point, I have somebody that has misnomia that's claiming that as a disability. What do I do? Misnomia, fun fact, is someone who cannot stand the sound of chewing, which it is potentially a
okay.
disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act. This is my favorite ADA example. So, because it's funny, right? I mean,
Right. Well, and I'm just thinking of the number of times I've been frustrated by my husband, like, I "Can you stop?"
I know, I know. I might happen to have this particular affliction. Not to be TMI, but anyway, to look at it and say, okay, somebody is looking for this accommodation, you know, help me walk through. And at that point, I get a chance to partner with you, and we don't need a time machine because we're creating facts in real time. So
Mhm.
it could be that we had an initial misstep. No problem. Happens all the time. Calm, confident. What are our next steps? Okay, we might need to take a step back and talk to that person. We might need to get a medical note from their physician. We might need to, confirm if they're missing work, that the absences meet whatever's required in the physician's note or healthcare provider's note. And then, kind of walk through that EDA process together. And when we're doing that, we are creating good facts that we can use in the event we get a claim. We're also, as an added benefit, complying with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So it's a win-win, right?
Right.
So, and then you're less likely to get a claim as well if you've treated the employee with dignity and respect, and explain to them that I understand that this is the accommodation that you would like. We don't have to give you the exact accommodation that you would like, but here's some other things that we could do. And partner together with the employee. And there are some people that are just completely unreasonable, and you can't please them no matter what. But then, we've still adopted an accommodation that's reasonable, and we can, defend ourselves on that. So if we get a charge of discrimination, we've got our file all nice and neat and in a bow that we worked with this person. This person rejected all of our suggested accommodations in writing. We documented it, and this is what we were offering. We're still offering it, and go from
Yeah,
there. And so it really does help employers comply with the law. It makes it not seem so scary to comply with the law, and also helps us have a good foundation for a defense should a claim be filed. And that's
fantastic.
the best we can do, right?
Mhm. Yep, yep, I love that. So Jennifer, the next part of our time together is where we do our sniff test. So we've taken a peek, we've swirled it around a little bit and shaken it, and we give it a sniff. I'm gonna go ahead and take a drink, but
Okay.
and what our sniff test is, we propose a couple of scenarios, and I will just tell you that these are built by AI. They are not based on real cases. They are not based on anything any listener has submitted. They're fabricated by a machine. So so there's no risk of a confidentiality issue there. But we just kind of want to talk through some issues that are plausible and phone calls you may get. So First scenario, an HR leader notices a pattern of a manager behavior that feels off, inconsistent discipline or questionable comments like your front desk comment before,
It
and
isn't so.
it's say it isn't so. And we have some rising employee complaints, but nothing that's yet triggered any kind of formal investigation. Leadership is hesitant to involve legal because there's no lawsuit yet and they don't want to overreact. And HR is left weighing whether to flag the issue or wait until there's a clearer legal threshold. And the question isn't whether something is illegal yet, it's whether waiting makes the situation harder to manage later. So, from a legal perspective, when do you feel is the right time for HR to be looping in legal counsel in a situation like this?
Well, if HR is in a position where they're not sure what to do, that's the time to pick up the phone because, again, we can talk about it. And most of many, many, many times I'm involved in situations and the employee absolutely never knows that legal counsel has been consulted. So again, the best thing to do is engage me. I can help review emails. I can help draft emails. I can help, hey, let's bring this person in to, have a conversation. No, maybe what they said isn't illegal, but it's certainly unprofessional and, perhaps violative of our policies. And so that's certainly something that we want to address. And honestly, if you can get things nipped in the bud at that stage, you perhaps have saved a manager's career because if the manager continues down this road, it's going to lead to discipline, it's going to lead to claims, but also you have a very unhappy
Mhm.
scenario.
Yep.
Your morale in your workforce goes down, you're losing productivity, all of those things.
Mhm.
And so it's really important to nip those things in the bud. And honestly, a 15-minute phone call might save you, a 25 or $50,000 lawsuit. And so
Yep.
those are the best times to call and to help walk through maybe some easy next steps. You sit down, you do a verbal conversation with the person, you document the verbal conversation in the file, and that very well may be the end of it, that the person realized that their jokes aren't funny, that they're inappropriate, and maybe they get some good dad jokes going forward.
Right. Here, let me send you a link to some appropriate jokes for you. I love the framing, Jennifer, of you're doing this supervisor a favor by calling them out on it. I think a lot of times, like in this particular scenario, leadership's like, well, we don't want to make a thing that's not a thing yet. But by avoiding the thing, you're actually doing a disservice to that supervisor or manager by not bringing them in line and saying, "Hey, look, this thing that you're doing is not okay, and we wanna stop it now before you escalate and do something worse," right? I like that framing. That's very good.
Being
Um,
nice isn't always kind.
100%.
It's
We are
not
on the
kind.
same page.
Not
Yep.
being honest with people is not kind.
Yep.
Because if they're doing it at the front desk, they're probably doing it elsewhere. And although they should know that they shouldn't be doing that,
Mhm.
a good reminder at the beginning, might save somebody's career. And if they're
Yep.
a manager, they're probably a good worker and it's somebody that you want to keep. And so you don't want to keep quiet on it
Mhm.
and not
Mhm.
tell them. Now,
Yeah.
if you tell them and they start retaliating against the people that complained or trying to figure it out, well, that's a whole nother problem, right?
Mhm.
But hey,
Mhm.
stop making comments at the front desk when you come in. It's not appropriate and front desk person doesn't really appreciate it. I know you were trying to be funny, but it wasn't received that way. So, can you just stop doing that? Thanks so much.
Mhm.
Have a great day.
Mhm.
I'll see you at
Yep.
lunch.
And our expectation is that you will be an adult and take that feedback as it's meant to be, which is to help you be successful.
Right.
Right. I'm gonna do you the courtesy of being super direct about this issue because you deserve to know.
Right.
So, yeah. Okay, let's go on to I love that. Let's go on to number 2. An HR team reaches out to outside counsel with a question about a sensitive employee issue, but the advice they receive is maybe overly cautious, highly technical, or you need to comply. But it doesn't seem to reflect how the organization actually operates. I love that these are exactly things you've touched on already. The guidance is legally sound, but it's impractical given the culture, the workplace, the leadership dynamics, all of the things we've talked about. And HR wonders whether the advice is truly protective or just kind of really detached. So now we're getting into the conversation about the relationship, right?
Mhm.
So the underlying issue is not the advice itself, but the lack of shared context. So, what responsibility does HR have to provide that context so that counsel can move beyond the safe answer to get into the weeds with them?
Well, people push back on me all the time. So I think it's perfectly appropriate to push back in a very professional way to say, okay, I understand these are the factors that I need to do. But, I, so many times I get our system won't let us do that. Our system won't let us do that. And so, while I hate that a system is driving uh, an answer,
Yep,
sometimes that's just how it is. So, I mean, sometimes the
yep,
answer is, well, we need a new system, but we're not getting a new system. So what can we do short of that? But I think it's perfectly appropriate to say, hey, I understand what you told me. Here's what the culture of our organization is, and here's what the issue is with implementing, the solution that you recommended. Or, hey, I don't really have a solution. I know you told me what the law is, but I need, 3 to 4 steps on what we need to do next on how to handle this from a practical standpoint. And if the person can't give you that, you might want to think about getting a second opinion because different lawyers have different experiences, and it could be that somebody's maybe slightly over their skis on a certain area, or maybe just their viewpoint isn't aligned with what the company needs. I mean, I have dear friends, and we've, maybe been trained by the same people, we've practiced together, and we might have very different viewpoints on how to
sure,
handle the same issue. And it might be that neither is, nothing's illegal or, you know, not it's not a matter of whether it's legal or not, it's what's the best fit for this client. And it might be that, one approach does not fit this client. And because employment law is not a one size fits all um, at all. And one of the things that you really get from a long term relationship with a client is what their appetite is for risk. And I have certain clients that have a huge appetite for risk. I had one client say to me, Jennifer, what's life without risk? What's life without risk? And I'm like, well, as long as you are comfortable with the risks that we have outlined, should those come to be realized, I'm good. And then there are other clients that are, terrified of anything bad happening. And they think, if they get a charge or a complaint, it's because they're a bad employer or whatever. And that's the whole other extreme, right? So there's room in the middle, but you have to know your client and know what their appetite is for risk and just kind of walk that through together. Hey, on a good day with this problem, you know, it goes away and you never hear anything again. On a bad day, you might be looking at a $50 million class action. So here's some things that
yep,
we can do to prevent that.
yep. Terrific. I love that. Well, we have come to the time where we need to take a break. So we're going to take a little pause. We're going to remind our listeners that our sponsors are the reason that we're able to bring HR Wine Bar to you. So we're going to ask you to just let it breathe. Don't fast forward. We'll be right back. And we're back for our second pour. Welcome back to our listeners. Thank you for listening to those sponsors advertisements. We appreciate you doing that. Welcome back to Jennifer. Here we are. So our second pour is where we just pose some random questions. Um, I think what I would like to know, Jennifer, if we are picking up the phone following that call to action to call and talk to counsel and set a baseline, what are some things that you would like to know, things that would be helpful for us to have at the ready for you? What provides the best context for you to start building that relationship?
Well, if it's a new client and I've never talked to you before, I'm going to just want some basic information, how many employees do you have? What states are you in? Talk to me about your industry. Knowledge about your industry and your employee culture, I think, is some of the most important information that I can have.
Mhm.
Because, if you are a healthcare facility, your culture is going to be very different than if you're a startup in the tech space, right? And
Yep.
so providing your counsel with context of, kind of what your workforce is like, what your culture is like, what your goals are as a company, so that I can actually partner with you to help you get to the goals that you want to get to with HR is super important. And I also really like to get to know the HR people that I work with. I value those relationships so much, and I have maintained relationships with people that I've worked with. It's one of my favorite things, is actually getting to know the person. And what that helps me do is also ascertain what your experience is. So, maybe you're a brand new HR person and you have never worked in this industry before. Okay, well, if it's healthcare, for example, then I know I need to give you more information about, for example, physicians have to have contracts and these are some things that you need to know. Whereas if you've worked in a healthcare space for the last 30 years, all of those basic healthcare things that you need to know. And so I won't need to cover those things with you, but it's really good for me to get to know kind of what your experience is so that I can best help you, because it's really important to me that I actually am partnering with you and in a position to have the information to really be able to help you. Because, it is garbage in, garbage out. I can't fix what I don't know about, right? So,
Yep.
you
Yep.
know, um, like my husband is an engineer and he had somebody call him on a Sunday, customer call him on a Sunday, and they had they couldn't get something working. Something in their electrical system wasn't working. Well, after 45 minutes, they finally mentioned that they had a fire. Well, you should have led with that, Bob. I mean, if you've got a fire, let's lead with the fire, right? I mean, I understand your electricity isn't coming on, but you should have led with the fire, right? So if you've got a fire, I need to know that because otherwise, because your electricity is probably not coming back on, right? So, I mean, if you have a notice from the EEOC that they're getting ready to file suit against you or a class action demand letter, I lead with that because, that's a fire and we've got to get the fire. We got to get the fire at least under control before we
Yep.
do the other things. So, it kind of
We'll pick
depends.
the context up along the way as we deal with the
Right.
fire. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm reminded of this is a good, reminder for HR folks too when you're going into a new role. I had a new role years ago and didn't think to ask the question if they had any active lawsuits with regards to the employment space, and luckily, I was not the one to be deposed, but it would have been really helpful to understand the culture a little better based on that
Well,
lawsuit.
and things I ask, because I've been in-house counsel. I mean, I actually, if I'm interviewing for an in-house counsel role, I ask who they use for outside counsel. And that does factor in whether that's a job I'm interested or not.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
also ask about, you know, lawsuits, litigation, how many charges a month do you get? I mean, so those are all questions that I would be
Yeah.
asking in a new engagement as well. If the EEOC is suing you directly, that's something I need to know right away. Or if you have 6 class actions going on, okay, that's something we need to know right away because that's going to inform all of the things that we're doing, moving forward. So it's really important to have that baseline knowledge. And if you do have a fire, just say, I mean, most employment lawyers are very accustomed to all sorts of varying degrees from very serious HR issues to, employees not getting along. And if you have some of those more serious things, it's good to pose those up front because it's information is power, right? And that's the best way to empower and equip your employment counsel to be able to partner with you because that it really is a partnership.
Yep, it is. Um, One of the things that, I wouldn't say I struggle with, but I'm curious about from your perspective is that after you have a conversation, maybe about a specific issue with an HR person, do you have any, suggestions for them about how they frame the conversation as they take it back to leadership, right? Because leadership, by and large, doesn't wanna be on the phone with legal counsel on an employment issue. They hired HR for a reason, they want HR to do it. But sometimes when we bring that data back to them, I feel like sometimes some things get lost in translation. Right. Do you have any advice for us about how to frame that conversation or the questions that we might ask you in order to write things down and prepare for that conversation going back to leadership?
Well, I think it's really important for your employment counsel to know what your leadership communication style is. So there are some leaders that want a lot of detail and they want to know, all of the details. And there are other leaders that lead in bullet points. So they want, a 5 bullet point summary of what do I need to know here. And so that helps, a lot of times your employment counsel can send you an email, a quick email after you have, conversed, to say, okay, here are the 5 things that we talked about that we need to know. And then you can take that and use that in your voice to communicate with your leader. But it is, again, having that relationship where your employment counsel knows that, hey, Susan, really is a detail oriented person and she really wants to know, the details. And Susan is always going to ask, how are other companies in our industry handling this? Or what is the projected cost of this? And so if I know that as employment counsel, then I can give you that information. And that helps you look good too, with your leadership to say, when you know that they always ask the same question, just give them the information. And then that makes you look proactive because you are being proactive and it gives them the information and saves them time and trying to sort through what's actually going on. So I think that's the most important thing. And again, that comes from, those long relationships where you really get to know folks. And, sometimes leadership changes and it's like, okay, well, Brian's brand new in his role. And so you probably need to give him more detail and more context than Steve, who's been here for 30 years. He knows everything that there is to know, and he wants 5 bullet points, and that's it. And he'll ask you if he has other questions. So
Right.
I think that's one of the superpowers in having those good relationships with outside employment counsel who can really help you, or even your in-house counsel. If you're dealing with,
Mhm.
large organization with in-house counsel, letting them know that information will help them best serve you because your in-house counsel wants to serve you well as well also.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that suggestion because on your side, you're taking those notes anyway.
Oh yeah.
For when we call for when we call you back, so why do the second why reinvent the wheel and do the work again on the HR side? Just take the legal notes, make sure you understand them, ask any clarifying questions, prepare your bullet points, take them over, and be ready to back them up should any additional information be necessary. That is a terrific piece of advice that I had never considered, so I love learning new things from my friend Jennifer.
Well, and if you aren't sure, draft it up and have the lawyer look at it. It should
Uh-huh.
take him or her probably, you know, a point one to look at it. And then everybody's on the same page and everybody feels comfortable and confident that we're giving our leaders the information that they need to know to make the good decisions. Because that, in the end of the day, is our job, is making sure that our leaders are fully, fairly informed so that they can make the best decision that they can for the organization that's aligned with their organization's values. And so that really is our job. And by partnering together like that, you know, it really can help build strong, relationships inside the company. And I don't know of a single company that doesn't want their place to be a great place to work, right? Nobody wants to have their employees sitting out in the parking lot, sick to their stomach, not wanting to come into work.
Right. The Sunday
Nobody wants that.
scaries.
Nobody
No.
wants. And so by doing these pretty simple communication things and walking together to give the leadership the best information, from, either in-house counsel or your external HR counsel, giving the best information and communicating in a way that makes sense to the people that you're giving the information and how they learn and how they, want the information is going to do nothing but help your organization be strong and help those relationships be strong. And then everybody wins. It's good.
Yeah. I'm reminded, for our listeners to go back to, I think it was episode 7, we had Bryn Reed on talking about HR's PR problem, and she described we have a PR problem, and attorneys do too, I know you get it. And so she had
Oh, HR
described
legal is though. I mean, it's like I am not the office of no. I swear to you.
I swear, no, we're not, no, and HR is not the fun police. But she had described
When I was in-house, I just have to tell you, I was like, okay, so I'm saying yes. And I want you to write it down that Jennifer Petersen said yes on February 6, 2026, because I don't want you to come back to me and say you always say no, because I said yes.
yes, yes,
No
and you should
caveats.
mark it
I
on your
said yes. Go. Go
yes,
forth and conquer.
fantastic. And she, Bryn had described our role in HR as really being an information conduit between leadership and employees. Yes, we're handling compliance. Yes, we're tracking engagement. Yes, we're doing all of these things, but really it's providing information both ways and all ways to all of the people who need it. And so I love that perspective that you have on that. That's fantastic. Okay, so we are in our last section, which Jennifer we call our wine flight, which is where it's kind of a teaching moment. Yep, we're going to do wine flight, even though I have a Pinot Grigio and you have some red, I think cab or something
I have a
like that.
cab. An
Yeah,
Alexander Valley cab. It's my favorite. Well, I have a
ver-
cab that's my favorite, but yeah, I'm a red
yeah.
wine gal.
Yeah, I'm doing a Costco Kirkland special right now. It's what was in the fridge. But we talk about our topic on a spectrum. So if we were talking about, and we tend to talk about legal and compliance on the dry side, which is where I'm drinking. And so if we were to talk about this concept as dry, we're talking about crisis only phone calls, oops management, like maybe not even going to your legal update. If you're not attending an annual legal update or even like twice a year, you really should be doing that. That's super dry. And our medium would be, a periodic check-in with counsel just to say, hey, I've got an issue attending your employment law seminar for your firm if they have one, just kind of shaking hands and checking in. And then on the sweet side, which I would hope that Jennifer and I are relationship based, we have a lunch planned in a couple of weeks to share our show choir mom update, but and our businesses and all of those things. And so that's our spectrum. So Jennifer, my question to you is what would you suggest for someone, no matter where they are in the spectrum, to move the needle one click forward toward building relationship with their counsel?
Reach out. Reach out, get to know the person. Most lawyers will take you to lunch for free. They won't
Oh,
charge you for lunch. They'll buy your lunch. They're happy to do that. All lawyers are looking for networking opportunities. They're all looking to get to know you better. So, there is such a thing as a free lunch. Reach
yeah.
out, reach out, get to know. Most of us are, personable people. And if your employment lawyer isn't personable, maybe that person isn't a good fit for you. But most lawyers are personable, not scary. I mean, and I think that's one of the hardest things that I battle is oftentimes HR folks that haven't gotten to know me are scared. They're scared of picking up the phone. They're scared of dealing with lawyers. And so, just pick up the phone, get to know the person, suggest that you go to lunch. They won't charge you and they'll probably buy and they'll buy. So,
And I'm gonna give a shout out to all of not just the, employment attorneys and to Jennifer specifically, but my brother is an attorney. I have lots of friends who are attorneys, and they are some of the best people in the world, and they got into their, profession to help people.
yeah.
Now what law school did to them in that process, we won't talk about. But they're just like HR folks, we're in HR to help people, to help our business leaders, to help our employees, to make sure things are balanced and to make sure that people are not having the Sunday scaries before they come to work on a Monday morning. And so they really are just like us, just with a different function within the conversation. So thank you for that. Yes, give them a call. Y'all go get your free lunch. So that's my
Yes.
call to action for you. Make that call, just reach out and see if you can touch base in person. That would be great. So our key takeaways today. Legal counsel is a strategy partner. It's not a signal of a failure when you pick up the phone. Picking up the phone and admitting that you need counsel, good humorous counsel is is a sign of professional maturity to know where your expertise ends and where you need assistance and then translating that message back to leadership so that you can be that information conduit. That is what this relationship is about. And if HR is responsible for protecting the organization by involving counsel, then do it early. Get ahead of the problem. That is the best place to be. Building a strong relationship here reduces fear, it reduces cost, which I'm going to encourage everybody to go find that keynote, Jennifer. We're going to have that someday. I want to know where that is. So we'll try to link that and just reduce the fallout of these types of things. So identify that attorney, make the reach out, schedule a non-crisis conversation, and then just build clarity around that relationship. So Jennifer, thank you so much for your time today. It's wonderful to see you on both our show choir mom front and on our employment law front. And here's our toast to end us out. To asking the hard questions early and building partnerships before the pressure hits, to HR professionals who protect people and organizations, and to good counsel that helps us do both really well. Cheers to HR.
Cheers.
And we're delighted to be joined today by Jennifer Petersen, a founder and managing partner at JRP Mediation and Employment Law here in Omaha. Her website is jrplaw.com. She works closely with HR leaders navigating complex employment issues. Jennifer brings a pragmatic, real world perspective on how HR and legal can work together better, not just when there's a crisis, but as ongoing partners in decision making. Jennifer, welcome to HR Wine Bar. I am delighted to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.